Hello, good morning, Silver Lining Gang. It's Andy. I'm back. I'm in Melbourne. I'm back on your time now in Australia. I hope you're well, gang. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us. It's the quarantine series, all about looking at how we're going to create the greatest comeback and an energy around it in 2020. I don't know if I could have cherry picked a better start to this second series. I've got a guy who is absolutely the personification of energy and the exact energy that I reckon is going to see us through to the end of the year with a bit of a run. So, NIC CUNI, thank you so much for joining us, man. Nick is an absolute star in the commercial real estate space. He is a guy that he's been very, very vocal and things like that with regards to his fitness and what have you, and mindset and mental health and all that sort of jazz, all those good things that not very many guys really tend to talk about. And I'm really quite proud to have him on the show. Nick, thanks for joining us, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, Andy. Thanks for having me. I've been watching your podcasts and your live streams and your singing as well, which that was a bit of fun.
Yeah,
that was good. It was a good moment in history for you. And yeah, I love it. So yeah, I'm really happy to be first cab off the ranks, mate. Especially at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, 1st of June,
mate.
1st of winter. Like, what a perfect time to start.
Oh, mate, it's a whole load of firsts this morning. It's so good. I'm looking outside my rather big window, thankfully, at Crown, and it's peeing it down with rain, and it's very typically Melbourne, and incredible footy weather. Where are you? But whereabouts are you, buddy?
So I'm in Geelong. I'm up in Geelong, so just outside the city. So a couple of minutes out in Geelong West. So I moved up here, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago with the family, and then went through a little bit of a separation. I went through a separation about 3.5 years ago, and sort of gone along the ups and downs of that sort of journey, and then now I've really found myself. I love this place. The kids are really happy, going to the local primary school, and it's a really, really good community out this way. And so much so that the property market's really starting to flourish out here, even amidst everything that's been going on. Things are starting to really lift, and there's signs in the city that, commercial and resi from a sort of larger scale, more of a high density type format is really going to come into play over the next few years. So you'll see quite a few more cranes go up in this part of the world.
Mate, before we get too heavy into what we're going to talk about today, give us a bit of an idea as to who you are. Human first, it's always the case. Tell us who Nick is, what you're about, where you're from, and what drives you, and all that sort of good stuff.
All right, how long have we got?
give us the highlight reel.
So. I was born in the sort of inner west of Melbourne 39 years ago. So I was born on the west side, the wrong side of the tracks. And, I sort of always worked really hard to try and be the best I could be. Even back then when I was a kid, I was super competitive. And then, as you sort of go through life, you go on your journey, and found real estate after I was a personal trainer for the first 5 years of my working career, which was amazing. And that was awesome. And that sort of set the scene for, my journey on my fitness program that I've sort of done sporadically throughout my life, but really been focused on it recently. And then, various real estate roles as most of us tend to do, until I really found my niche and found my feet at CBRE, where I became a director there in a short space of time. And, I was sort of brushing shoulders with some of the best of the best in sort of high-end commercial and resi real estate. So that was an incredible experience for me, and sort of took me from a general real estate agent really to, in that sort of, I was breathing in some rarefied air up there. It was quite an experience. Doing that gave me the confidence to open my own agency for a brief period. So I opened that for about 3.5 years, which was a state agency, so EST8 agency. I'm always used to saying that because no one could ever understand that. Estate agency, EST-ATE? No, EST number 8. It's the number 8. And that went really well. I mean, it started off incredibly, and then selling off the plan apartments sort of took a bit of a dive once the government changed the stamp duty laws. So local investors couldn't get the stamp duty benefits, so they just stopped buying. So anyway, I kept pushing on because I got a lot of pride, and probably too much pride. And then got to the point where I started to really think about my family. And this is where the real me comes out. I missed my family. I missed my kids. I missed my friends. I was felt quite isolated in what I was doing. My mental health suffered. My physical health suffered as well. And I got to the point where I was sort of staring it down the barrel thinking, I'm not the happiest person in the world. I'm not the person that I've always, strived to be. I lost the drive. I lost the energy. I lost the motivation. And I thought to myself, things have got to change. I'm not going to go on that now because this is an introduction, not a not a delve into my mindset. But it really took off from there, and now I find myself happier than ever. But I've found another passion. I've found another love. I've found the time to spend with my kids and really redevelop that relationship, which was always there, but is now stronger than ever. So if you ask me who I am now, I'm just a happy, nearly 40-year-old who's on the right journey.
Well, it's an interesting one, right? Because this going through. I mean, we're not just talking about COVID now. Like, if we look at 2020, I mean, Australia's copped it, right, in a big way. Droughts, bushfires, COVID. It's really has had to roll with the punches quite significantly. And for a lot of people, what this has done, it sort of shocked them into really assessing the things that you were talking about just now in terms of what's most important, how can I align myself with those things, and what have you. For yourself, obviously, you, for all intents and I won't say crashed and burned, but you found that you grew a realization as to where your priority lied, and it very much is aligned with your family and so on and so forth now. Tell me, before we go into how your mindset is now, tell me if you could look back retrospectively at the old Nick, if we were to say that for a time, how did the old Nick operate for as long as he did before he, what were the internal mechanics? What did the internal mechanics sound like before you sort of came to that realization that family really was the priority in your life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I was running on the hope and a whim that things were going to change tomorrow afternoon. Like, I thought the market's got to come back. The government's going to change their thoughts on stamp duty. Things are going to come back into my favour because I deserve that, because I've worked my ass off and, I've taken the blows and I've gone through this. And it was almost like I was getting to the point where I was going, I deserve this. This has to happen to me. I've been working really hard. Why isn't it coming to me now? All these sort of excuses that I was sort of finding myself covering, my tracks up with, where I thought that's not going to work. That was that point where it's not going to work anymore, saying that and hoping. I've just got to start doing, and I've got to start changing, and I've got to start making myself the best version of myself that I can be. Because I was always very fit, and this is only, I'm not talking, this was 10 years ago when I was very fit. It was only a handful of years ago that I was training every day. I didn't touch alcohol. I was a picture of health and fitness. But you can get yourself into that rut very quickly. And that's where I found myself. And I found myself, I was drinking more than I should. I was eating more than I should. I was going out and doing all kinds of, fun things. But I wasn't thinking about, what am I doing now, and is it helping me?
And that's an interesting thing. And that's a really good thing that I want to highlight straight away is that period of denial, that stuff wasn't going to work out, right? It's that head in the sand stuff that so many of us fall into. We all fall into that at one point or another when we're facing some sort of adversity in our lives, yet we just seem to go, yeah, nah, she'll be fine. The very stereotypical Australian, she'll be right sort of stuff, which is so which is it's almost cliched now within Australian vernacular. That's the thing. That's the part that I think is going to be really, really prevalent in this series. Is how many of us, from a society point of view, how many of us are still in that period of denial whereby there's just this inherent belief that things are going to go back to normal, and you know, you're going to be able to kick goals like you did do before, and all that sort of jazz, right? I mean, you've gone through some massive changes, and we were saying this before we just got started. You actually really got into a COVID mindset prior to it actually taking place, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But your observations around this whole thing of denial and people just not being awake to the reality of the scenario, and therefore how much that's holding them back. How much have you seen it? You know, bearing in mind you know about it very, very well. How much of it do you see around you, about, you know, in conversations about people that just don't seem to comprehend the scenario or the situation, or even if they're not directly affected COVID wise, you can just tell that the situation they're in is just not going to get them anywhere.
I see walking up the shops to get a coffee in the morning, you know, just the amount of people congregating and, you know, being super close with each other. And then you have conversations with, you know, with people just generally, and they're sort of, I think this is just going to blow over. So I'm just hearing that a lot. You know, there's no specific scenario, you know, for the sake of not highlighting anyone in particular. But, you know, I hear a lot of conversations regarding, you know, things will get back to normal. You know, we'll start making sales again like we used to. But the reality is we're not. I mean, we don't have crystal balls. And, you know, to even attempt to predict what things are going to look like next week, you know, we can't. I'm not one to sit here and say this is what it's going to look like, or even this is what I think it's going to look like. I just think we've never been through anything like this before. So we're just going to have to, we're going to know what it's like once we go through it. And we're going to have to be, you know, we're going to have to be adaptable, but more adaptable than ever before. We're going to have to see the signs, walk through the door, and then we're going to have to adapt to the new scenario. And that's the way you're going to do it. That's the way you're going to win through this whole period. Not predicting and planning and going, well, this is how I'm going to be now because this is going to work because this is what I think it's going to be. No, it's about seeing what happens. It's like an open for inspection when you see someone comes in. You know, you've got to adapt to that type of person and work with them to try and make it work and get a listing or get a sale or whatever it might be. So, you know, I think that's going to be the way that you win during this period.
I think there's a couple of really, really key highlights that I'm desperate to go into with you a bit more. I'm so glad that you brought them up. First one being the whole thing of taking action. The second one being that adaptability piece. Let's break it down. So the first one, and I want to talk about your trip, you know, your latest health trip, which has been ever present on your social media, your Instagram and all that sort of stuff. But I will be at pains to say, gang, it's not been in the very typical look at my muscles type way. It has actually had some meaning behind it, which has been cool, which is one of the reasons why I actually, you know, really started interacting with Nick a little bit more. Tell me about why you finally started taking action with your fitness in a bit more of a meaningful way, because you said you dabbled in and out of it without being too serious over the last few years. What was it that made you take some real deep and meaningful and permanent action with your fitness back in December?
Well, no, it was prior to that. So it was this time last year. It was sort of June, July. It was June, July. So I was in the depths of winter. I wasn't feeling amazing. My daughter took a photo of me. She came into the bedroom while I was putting my suit on. And it's probably the worst photo I've ever seen in my life. And she showed me, she goes, "Dad, look at you." And I was like, oh my God, do I look like that? Because you don't know sometimes you just don't know what you look like, you know? No. And it wasn't so much what you look like. I mean, that was just the icing on the cake. But then I was thinking, shit, I feel like crap, you know? I probably had a hangover that morning and I was getting ready to go to an appointment or whatever the case may be. And I was just like, this is just not where I thought I was going to be. I thought I was going to be a picture of health when I was 40, and I'm not going to dwell on this part because this will get me too emotional, but my old man passed away in his early 40s. And, I was similar age to what my daughter is now, and I've always grown up thinking I don't want to get myself in a position where I'm, staring down the barrel of life, in my early 40s. I think that just gets ingrained in you when something like that happens to you. So I think all of those little components, plus the whole stress of the business and what I was going to be doing in the future, and everything just went, nah, effort, let's get into this and let's make this happen. So I started the FAF 2020 challenge, which, can you swear on this podcast?
Yeah,
Not really.
you can. Yeah, you can.
It was simple. It's not a bad swear. It's just like fit as fuck 2020. Like I wanted to be the fittest I could possibly be by the time I turned 40. And that's October the 7th this year. For anyone wanting to send me a card or a birthday present, October 7th this year, I'll be 40, and I'm on the journey to feel the best I've ever felt. I'm doing a strength program now. I'm feeling incredible. Look, I'm putting on some good size now, as well as losing weight. So it's really taken that next step. Now, when I say I've dabbled in it and done a few bits and pieces, I've always been healthy, always trained. But what I'm doing now is following a structured program, and I'm monitoring my weights like I did when I was 20. I'm increasing my weights to make sure that I'm getting stronger and, being able to lift more every week and, marking down every time I, lift 10 kilos over. And I don't just sit there and say, I'm going to try and lift 120 or 130 or 20 or 15 or whatever the case may be. If I can add another 10 onto it that session and do 20 more than last week, I'll do that too. So I'm really conscious of what I'm doing, and it's paying off. So I feel very strong, and I'm feeling mentally really, really sharp, which is great.
I think there's so many good bits to come out of that what you just said. One of the key things there, I think, is the whole thing around structure. I was having this conversation over message with someone just last night, and I was saying to them, because I'm one for chaos. Like, I love chaos and spontaneity, which is why we do this live show and why I love auctions and so on and so. But I'm getting tired of forever being spontaneous, because for me, it's an attention span thing. Like, when I'm excited about something, like, it'll be all guns blazing, so on and so. But for things like fitness and so on and so forth, like those sorts of things that require longevity, it's very much a case, if you don't have a structure, then the times and days where you don't feel like doing it, you won't do it, because you haven't got a box to tick. You haven't got that sort of accountability via that sort of structure, via a structure of some description, right? Now, you coming from you starting your sort of work like in that sort of personal training, that sort of fitness side of things. Do you think that's probably something that you grew through that, or have you always been a kind of a guy who does like a bit of structure and whatnot in your life, or is it something that you really sort of honed in on when you were in that fitness space?
Nah, mate. Even when I was a local real estate agent, I had no structure. I'd just, I'd be one, I got a sniff of a lead and I was onto it, like a detective. So, that's how I ran my business, and that's how I ran my life. So this has been a really different, really different, setup for me. So the reason why I didn't do the typical 8-week or 12-week challenge is because I think your attention span can sort of service you during that period. You can be spontaneous and do an 8-week challenge. You can focus on that. That's why I said I have to do it. If I don't make it a 12-month challenge and be 100% accountable for myself and my actions and everything I do, and I even called myself on it a few times and I think I put a poll on Instagram, who thinks I can do it? And it was like 60-40, I can do it. And so I noted down everyone that said I can't do it. And that became a mini motivation as well. And I was really surprised at some of the names that I read there. I was like, shit, my own mum doesn't think I can do it. God. And I thought to myself, like, that's going to be real motivation, because a 12-month challenge is a serious challenge. That's I'm like getting to the end of it now, and I'm still looking back going, I can't believe I've stuck to this for this long. But that's now created a whole new mindset for me, and even moving into some new opportunities, some new business opportunities, I'm thinking about the way that I'm going to run that business in a very different way as well. So I think what I've done out of this whole FAF challenge, this fitness challenge, is actually create some really good business mindset, and sort of structure within that. So, because I get up, I didn't train this morning because I had a shower and did my hair so I can come on and talk to you live.
Gotcha. And I
had to change
appreciate
my shirt because I dripped coffee down it before, just 30 seconds before we started. It's good though. It creates a little bit of contrast between your light shirt and my dark one.
It does, mate. It does. We're all good. We're all good. If only we didn't tell them.
It's fine. So that was, so that sort of, I think that set me up for some really, good structure. That's something that I needed because I was good at what I did in terms of I was able to fly by the seat of my pants and be spontaneous in any job that I've had because I've always had good support around me. I've been able to employ, smart people that bolted onto me, whether it be a PA, an EA, a sales associate that would work directly with me. I was always smart about the people that I delegate work to. So I was good from that perspective. So from a leader mindset, it worked really well for me. But if I was on my own or if I was someone else's PA, I'd be the shittest PA in the world.
Mate, now talk to me about your mindset around structure, going into new projects, but also tying it in with what you talked about, the second bit of your spiel around adaptability. Now, because you mentioned how at the minute, we really cannot plot a course of any real substance with things with the way that things are changing as quickly as they are, right?
Yep.
How do we, and I know, this is just initial thoughts, with regards to your structure within a business or any structure within a business, how can we accommodate the adaptability that is clearly required moving forward for the foreseeable? Again, crystal ball, right? But there is not going to realistically be any real consistency in life, in society, in economy, or whatever for a decent chunk of time. So much so that it was worth really focusing, if you're a business owner, focusing on that adaptability piece. Now, how do you see the structure that you've taken from this amazing process, this amazing FAF process that you've gone through, which you've clearly stuck to, and credit to you for that? How do you see those two meshing together initially? What are your initial thoughts around that?
I think from an adaptability perspective, if I was going to take what I've learned through this, it's an Anthony Robbins line, but it's don't negotiate with yourself. If you set yourself a task, if you set yourself something to achieve, don't negotiate with yourself. Like, I think he mentions getting out of bed and going into his ice bath every morning. Like, it's not, I'll do it later, or I'll do it this afternoon, or I'll do it after breakfast. It's, I'm just going to do it. It just happens, without any context in your change in pattern. So I would say don't negotiate with yourself. If you say you're going to do something, just do it. The other point to that is, if you're a business owner and you've got staff, don't expect them to come back to work in terms of back in the office. Don't expect them to be the same level of motivation and the same level of focus that they've ever had before. I think everyone's going to be a little bit different. It's a bit like kids going back to school. Like, at the moment, my kids are back at school, but they're lost. They're really like, they've been used to sitting at home for the last 6 to 8 weeks. So I think if you can find agents that are have adapted enough to be able to still prospect and still make calls and still make sales, from their living room, they're the ones that you want to be working with, as opposed to the ones that would sit in the office. So I think the real leaders and the real sales experts are going to be found out over the next, couple of months. That's a given. The ones that are motivated internally, they can do it from home, they can do the work that's required. That's going to be another really big focus. So I think the number of people in an office is going to drop. Not that they're going to be in an office, but they're going to be at home and floating around. But the number of employees, I guess, will probably drop. And the cream always rises to the top in these type of scenarios and these type of times. So if we can find better agents or better people to work with and work for, if we can be adaptable in the sense that, it's not going to be normal anymore. So we're going to be working from home. We're going to be working from our car, which is a bit like the agent life. You sort of work around that, but you're not going to have that base being an office as such. Because I'm looking at different options now for me moving forward, and an office-free agency is something that I'm seriously considering, because I think if you can make it work, and we can do meetings in this type of forum in this scenario, why would you go and have that unnecessary overhead if you can really focus and drive a business out of this COVID scenario and make it work? I think that's something that a lot of people should be thinking about. That's for sure.
I think in any business, I think the adaptability piece is how you handle your people, and not being too rigid in your internal structures when it comes to accommodating quality people. I think for a lot of businesses, and I can understand it, right? At the end of the day, you need to have some sort of process, structure, procedure in order to create sustainability and consistency within your business. But I reckon HR departments are just going to have their heads like pop off, because the amount of flexibility that they are going to need to provide now in order to accommodate good talent, and to retain decent talent, I don't think it's going to take a hell of a lot to upset the apple cart when it comes to, and I'm not talking about talent being prima donnas or anything like that. I mean, you have your 100-pound gorillas that are just, everything's about them. And if it's not all about them, then they'll spit the dummy. I'm talking about decent people. I'm talking about decent people with decent values, because their values will become so much more prominent in everything that they do. Like what you've been saying about how when you went through this massive period of change and realization that family was the most important thing and everything revolves around that. I think a lot more people, because of the realizations that they've come to through all this COVID stuff, if not before, I think that's one of the big reasons as to why good people are going to need to be worked around, not worked into your model. I think you've hit the nail on the head there with the adaptability piece. It's going to be how you not manage, but I think how you collaborate now with these good people to make sure you get the best out of them. It's a bit like I still maintain the fact that stay-at-home mums, they're doing the most important job, right, in terms of bringing up the next generation and so on and so on. So I'm not belittling the whole motherhood thing. It's the hardest job in the world. But there is so much corporate, commercial, whatever you want to call it, talent that is within that individual, within that mom, that is just not getting utilized, because the fact that the industry, the economy has not been willing to accommodate them and their way of life and their life pattern, right? The fact that everything does revolve around the kids. I'm hoping that these stay-at-home mums are going to be some of the people that will really truly benefit from everything that's gone on, because my word, is there some talent kicking around in that pot. And I think this is going to be a massive wake-up call to a lot of I'm hoping, right? We're hoping, you say we're hoping that it's going to be a huge wake-up call to these business owners to go, shit, there is some serious talent. If all I need to do is make my business adaptable enough to allow them to come and rock and roll for me.
Mate, you've hit the nail on the head in a big way. Because that's those people, and there's stay-at-home dads and stay-at-home mums. But I think you're right, because they've got some of the best networks, especially locally.
Absolutely.
Like you pick the right person in the right group, and all of a sudden they're getting listings left, right, and centre, because they've adapted to their type of group, and they've got the knowledge, they've got the understanding, and they've got the database as well. So I've actually had thoughts in that direction. So it's you're on the money, mate.
Mate, it's really, I know, you know, you come out of real estate and you talk about businesses in general. I think, um, what's your sort of take? I mean, I don't know what experiences you had or you haven't had from a business perspective or otherwise around the whole topic of trust within your team, trust within your, because there's going to have to be some blind trust getting thrown out there, like,
Yeah,
or not blind as such. I mean, you know, there will be a little bit of that when you're taking on new people, um, but there's going to need to be a greater degree of trust
yeah.
with respect to getting stuff done and what have you. How do you feel business owners are going to need to work their way around this inherent lack of ability around trusting people?
Yeah, well, that's a big one. I mean, trust in every environment's very important. But when I started my agency after I left my director role, I took out a small office. It was only like 50 square meters, and
Mm.
mind you, I had 10 agents, so it's not big enough for that. But I did that on purpose because I wanted them to. Believe it or not, work from home and work from displays and not come into the office too much.
Mm.
So, I'd have a Monday morning meeting sometimes on the screen. There'd be a couple of us in the office, but the other ones would be on FaceTime and other. So, we were doing all that early days. So the whole trust thing was really important for me. So that was part of my hiring process, was to,
Mm.
ask them questions that would sort of give me the answers that they were sort of trustworthy in that regard.
Mm.
And a lot of them weren't from a real estate background. They didn't come from the general real estate background. One was an interior designer. They sort of came from a few different areas. One was from the army. So he was actually very good. He was very robotic in the way that he'd call people.
Mm.
Just get shit done, which was great. But everyone had their own personalities, and I could trust them because I knew that they were going to do what they said they were going to do. Whether there was always a couple that would really take the piss, and I'd pop into a display and there'd be no calls going on at all. They'd be
Mm.
sitting, eating food, and walking around talking to their mates. So I'd find out those pretty quickly and nip it in the bud. But I guess a good
Mm.
thing of working in other areas and having people in different locations is that you don't have that little cancer in the office that's, wasting everyone's time and sort of pulling them into their world of being unproductive or
Mm.
non-productive. The Having them all work in different areas means their mindset is their buddy, and they have to do the work. They have to make the calls, and they don't have anyone else sort of pulling them away from that. So
Mm.
I think I think it's going to be a good thing to be able to work in that regard, and trust is going to come down to it. But you're going to see the results on the board like anything, whether they're in the office or out of the office. The results are going to talk. If you're not making any
Yeah.
sales, you're working from home. Sorry, mate, there's no job for you here. But
Mm.
someone else might be making 5 or 10 sales a month, or 15, or listing great properties and working from home as well. So you know that they're putting in the work. So I guess, results don't lie. So you'll be able to see that pretty quickly.
And I think that's the ultimate barometer, right? And that's, I think that's where business owners need, especially in sales businesses, whether it's real estate or otherwise. I think they just need to put faith in the board, in the results board, right? And how they get to that, to a degree, is up to them. I mean, you would obviously need to convey and maintain a level of standards with regards to the brand. Obviously, there's still got to be a degree of control around that. But outside of that, like you said, I mean, you might have a stay-at-home parent who does not very much in terms of calling and what have you, but doesn't have to because of the playground culture.
Yeah,
They are the fawns of the playground at pickup time, and everyone just goes hey, and then they end up getting
hey,
stuck that way. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And that could be a very, very effective way for them. But that all comes back to that whole being adaptable towards the individual and how they do well. I mean, as
yeah,
long as they're doing it ethically and in a way that isn't going to bring your integrity into question, then who cares?
Yeah.
To a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
Who cares? As long as you've got that, as long as a leader you maintain a bit of awareness for them and for yourself around, right, look, we understand how this is how you're getting your business right now. Are we making sure that we've just got some contingency planned in case that dries up, or in case your kid goes somewhere else, or or what have you? With respect to you mentioned something before about their mindset is within themselves and so on and so forth. I think one thing that this isolation piece has brought forward as well is the need to be part of a collective or feel part of a collective. So your opinion, and I'll stop hitting you with these harder questions. Your opinion on how we can make people feel like they're a team without them actually working together. Is it a recruitment piece around that, or because I think running a business is really lonely. You know that as much as I do. It's really bloody lonely. So how do we stop that from causing any issues with people?
I think that's a great question, because that's been the big question that people have asked right through this isolation period, and I think that's why you've had these Zoom catch-ups with 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 people, where people are having drinks together over a computer now when they probably live a couple of suburbs away. It's that's probably one way to do that. Keeping them accountable, where they would probably chair the sales meeting for once a week, or they come up with something that's going to help the rest of the team. I think having good one-on-one conversations with your team members, and talking through situations and seeing how they're going every day or every week or whatever you need to do, and just seeing whether that's what they need, because not everyone needs to feel a part of the team. There's a lot of people that work within agencies that quite frankly, they just get their job done and they're quite happy because they've got their families and they've got their other bits and pieces. So I guess if they're aligned with the brand and they have the regular conversations, then I think that's going to be a situation where they'll be fine. But the ones that need that, I'm wondering whether they're the ones that don't perform as well as the others, where they need that boost from the other agents in the office to sort of get them to that level. So that might be a whole mindset program that they'd need to go on and really focus on themselves and find out who they are and find out what type of agent they really are, and develop their sense of self. That's probably just a very high level, focused on a very few different types of people. But I think that might be a strategy that would really help people like that.
I'm wondering if related to sport, with respect to the whole tribalism thing, the pride in the badge, or the pride in the tribe, shall we say? How to create that sort of level of pride that drives people forward. I think so. For my personal, I enjoy being a part of a tribe. Like I enjoy leading off, but ultimately for me, like there are still people that can do extremely well in a sales role or whatever, but their motivations are very, very different compared to those purely autonomous sales beasts, shall we say. And I think what you've touched on there is something that Chanel touched on in our first series about that whole piece around individualization of your management style. I think leaders that are lazy, and that sort of set right this week, that's what we're doing this week, crack on, I think you'll find that they'll fall on their arse really quickly. Because even the ones that are autonomous, they love whether it's an ego stroke or just an affirmation that, yeah, mate, you are the best. We crack on. I think the individualization of our leadership styles, I think, is going to be incredible. And I think that sort of also ties into what you mentioned about the incredible need for adaptability. I think a lot of leaders are going to need to go back to the drawing board in terms of how and really self-aware on how adaptable are they towards the people, not just the situation, but the people within their organizations. I think that's going to be critical. I think the franchise model, I think the franchise piece around that, there are some franchises that love just having everyone do exactly the same shit. They're like they've got their ideal weeks or whatever it is, their ideal structures, and everybody has to go and do a call session like 3 times a week, blah 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 blah. I'm wondering how they're going to be sustainable. I wonder how they're going to work out. But mate, what I love about you is the fact that what I love about, and guys, please follow this lad, because aside from anything else, the way that you go about what you do, it's quite clear that you've got a couple of battle scars, whether it's human, work, whatever. But you're not afraid to show them, which I think is fabulous. And I want to just quickly, before I let you go, mate, because I know you're a busy guy, but I want to just quickly touch on the mental health piece, because you've been very vocal with regards to mental health and so on and so forth, and your trip with that and your experiences with that and what have you. How has, I mean, I know you've been on a very solid path, but how has your mental health stood up to all of the external noise that's going on?
Again, whether you call it fortunate or not, I think I went through the hardest period before things sort of got the way they are now. So I think I sort of went through the tough times probably before I even realised it. So that could have been January to May last year, where I probably went through my real tough times, where it was only until that sort of June, July, August where I started to realise, shit, I think I've really been affected by everything that's gone on, and it's probably just caught up with me because I wasn't one to ever talk about it too much. Whereas now I feel really comfortable in talking about it because I'm through it, and I feel, like I've been able to mend, and I've been able to get through the other end with, support from friends and family and professionals and everyone that's sort of helps you along your journey. I think you're scared of being judged when you're actually going through it, because you're vulnerable at the same time. So, I'm more inclined to talk about it now that, I've sort of, the scars have healed, if you know what I mean. So, and then you can move on and you can help other people. And it's been, ever since I've started to talk about it, the amount of people that, and people that you would never expect, because I was someone that they would never expect to have gone through something like this. Everyone had an idea of who I was personally, without really knowing me. And then when I've started to open up like this, it's just opened up some really good friendships and some dialogue with people that I never would have spoken to in my life, probably. So it's one thing to go through it, but then it's the ability to be able to be, vulnerable enough to talk about it and to accept people as well. And the conversations I've had and people that I don't like to use the word helped, but probably given some, friendly advice to over the journey to kick them into the right type of mentality to move forward. And these are some, high performing agents and sports people and people from a whole range of different areas in life. It's been quite humbling in that fact that people are not scared to contact you and to be honest about where they're at. So I'm really thankful that I've been through this to be able to come out of it and be the man I am now.
I think the key word is the vulnerability bit, right? Because like at the minute, I think a lot of people, and this is, I'm not blaming social media for this. I think social media is just a tool. It's the way that people use it that is the problem. And I think, especially in the real estate space. Last week there was, you're probably, I'm glad that you're not. You probably don't follow any of this, and it's a good thing that you don't. Last week there was a real sort of storm in a teacup around a direction that someone was taking, and the backlash of that, and it was just, the level of judgment was just insane. It was crazy. Like, it was just not nice. It was very, very toxic, to be perfectly frank, in my opinion. But I think that was just a real sort of microscopic view on a very big macro issue around judgment. And what it's done is, with a lot of people, is create a level of self-judgment that prevents people from even being vulnerable openly to other people, right? They don't even get past step one. That understanding of being vulnerable within yourself before you go to your partner or your best mate or your parents or whatever the case may be, right? I know you mentioned, and it's a very physical example for you, with your daughter sort of saying, "Hey, Dad, look at that." But do you think that was there any sort of time that you can sort of pick up in particular where you had that sort of internal dialogue with yourself, where you were like, you looked at yourself and were like, "Shit, Nick, you ain't bloody Teflon, right?" Like, was there any sort of particular situation or scenario or awakening around that?
No, I think at the time I didn't really see it, because I've always, in my head, I've always been fit. I've always been fit, and I've always felt fit, and I've always exercised, and I've always been that way inclined. So I think I was blind to it. I think I was totally blind to it. And it was someone that's close to me, like, she was like right in here, taking a photo going, "Dad, have a look at you," that I was like, God, that's not. And it wasn't just, guess the visual of being, overweight and not looking healthy. It wasn't a great thing, because that's not something that I want to put onto my daughter and say that, just because you're overweight means you're a bad human. It's got nothing to do with that. So I was very careful in the way that I approached that one. I laughed because I was like, "Geez, look at me trying to put my pants on," and they kind of don't fit. And so I was very careful about that. And I have been very careful about the way that I've articulated what I've been doing. It's all about how I'm feeling, Lil. It's all about how I'm feeling. It's all about my mindset. It's all about all that sort of stuff. I'm looking much better than I ever have, because that's just a byproduct, Lil, of being fit. And I'm talking to my daughter now, where I don't want her to think that I'm doing this just from an aesthetic point of view. It's an overall inside and out type of mentality, which I've really promoted. And that's why I've done a lot of the Instagram stuff, to be able to say that this is not just about one side of it. It's about, feeling good, and it's about my mental health. It's about everything. Because I was just going to post pictures of myself getting fit. Everyone's like, "Hello, good morning, tosser." That's not, that's what it would be like without any dialogue. So I was really conscious about, adding that dialogue into what I was doing, because it made it holistic, and it made it sort of more easily accessible to everybody to understand why I was doing it. And it's had positive effects on people, which I'm proud of.
Mate, that's exactly why I gravitated towards you. It's not, it was all the messages were all around what the process is providing you with. It's not the end destination; it's the process that you go through to get to it that gives you all of these add-on results and wins and so on and so forth. And you're a great example. You really are. Like, and I do tip my cap to it, because there are some people that do things with the good intention of trying to help people, and there are some that just try and milk it for ego's sake, and they milk it for milking its sake, right? But I just think that, and this is my feedback to you, is you strike that balance of humility, but showing what the process can do for other people. And I think that's a brilliant example for others to follow. And so, mate, I think all credit to you in that respect.
Thanks,
all
bro.
credit to you, man. Look, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate it super early on a Monday morning, and I've disturbed your exercise schedule and everything. So that, and we've ruined the shirt. So thank you so much for sacrificing so much to be on the show. Mate, moving forward in terms of how people can really just take those first steps towards having the greatest comeback of their lives in 2020.
Yep.
You're like, any final thoughts on what people can do initially just to get themselves on that journey towards making a success out of this year?
Yeah, well, you've got to look at if you've got something that you want to achieve, and if you're passionate about whatever that is. What I did was just flick the switch. Don't make an excuse. Don't set a plan B. Just say, this is what I'm going to do, and just do it. Just flick the switch, make the change, because you will look back and say, shit, that was the best decision I made. I think that's as simple as that, mate.
I love that. I love simple, mate. I think simple is great. And I think no excuses now, I think, is probably going to be a strong theme throughout this series. Let's not just say, we'll try this and hopefully, but if not, we can always do that. And let's really put the flag in the sand, and like we said, not being so rigid in like saying, right, that's where we've got, but making sure that we can be adaptable, and we might have to go left and right and up and down and what have you to get there, but we will bloody well get there. And I think that's absolutely wonderful, mate. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks,
being
mate.
First up in this second series. Look, guys, Nick is very easy to find on social media. Find him on Instagram, find him on Facebook. CUNI is the surname. Mate, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, mate. That was awesome. Look forward to talking to you again.
All right, man. Take care.
See you, mate.